Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Welcome to another video. You want to talk bad video games, the 4 most iconic bad video games for any gaming console, any era, any generation of systems. There are 4 games to me that stand out as the most iconic, emblematic of being bad, truly awful, famous, and just an absolute piece of garbage, and well known as that. These games are known for being awful. Let's get to it. My Mount Rushmore of truly bad video games. All right, guys, we were counting down from 4 to 1. And number 4, the Uncanny XMen for the NES. One reason this game is on this list, because there were high expectations. It was the very first X-Men game for a home video game console, and it was published by LJN, who is famous for publishing bad games. It's a boring top-down action game with confusing mazes, small character sprites, stiff controls, ugly graphics, poor collision detection, and terrible music. Turn down the sound and crank up some rock and roll if you want to play this game. I don't advise it. Now, guys, back in the day, 89, 90, I worked at Lone Star Comics in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I had a copy of Hide-Lide, another terrible NES game. It's an RPG, truly awful. I traded my copy of Hide-Lide to my buddy Scott, who also worked at Lone Star Comics, because he had a copy of X-Men with a really cool box. It was a good looking game. At least the box looked good. Had a neat instruction manual and everything. And I thought, how bad could it be? There's no way it could be any worse than Hide-Lide. Well, it turns out and Scott thought the same thing. He thought X-Men was dreadful. And he thought, Hide-Lide, sure, I'll give it a shot. He didn't know what it was at the time, but how could it be worse than X-Men? Well, it turns out it was sort of a wash. Both games are awful, and if Hide-Lide were more famous, perhaps it would be on this list. Now, Hide-Lide did spawn Virtual Hide-Lide, a sequel, which is pretty bad as well. But anyway, Hide-Lide is terrible, but for these purposes, for this list, the Uncanny X-Men in general, the Marvel Comics superheroes, super famous, iconic. The game is iconic, known for being terrible for the NES. Like I said, it was the first X-Men game for a console, so that makes it really important release, but too bad it is so danged awful. Now, I got rid of my copy of X-Men because it was so bad, but these days, being a hardcore collector and everything, I was collecting back then, but not quite as stridently as now. I wish I had my CIB copy of X-Men, but I didn't want to play it, and I wanted it out of my sight, so I got rid of it. All right, number 3 on my list, Shaq Fu for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Guys, this game is infamous. It's famous for being bad. It definitely belongs on this list. It's a fighting game starring basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal, who everybody knows about. Even if you're not into sports or basketball, you know who Shaq is. And yes, that's as strange as it sounds. Shaq, a fighting game. He looks generic in this game, which is really unfortunate. He enters a mystical dimension to fight off bizarre enemies in a poorly balanced 2D fighter. Characters are small, which is ironic considering Shaq is enormous. Inputs feel delayed, and hitboxes are unreliable. Not great hit detection on this one. Nice animation. The game is nicely animated for sure. It's by Delphine Software, who programmed Flashback and Out of This World, so it's got nice animation, but poor physics, poor hit detection, cheesy dialogue, awkward design choices turn this into a punchline, not a playable game. Now, technically, Shaq Fu is kind of playable. You can play it, and there's worse games, but it is iconic. It is well known for being bad. That's why it's on this list, because it's a punchline. It's a joke. Shaq Fu. Yes, they did come out with a sequel later on the Switch, but, which kind of carried forward the legacy of Shaq Fu. Hence, that leads towards iconic nature, that it's still sort of relevant and people still joke about it. So yeah, Shaq Fu. Now, guys, I like Shaq. I think he's a great guy, and he's got Dallas-Fort Worth tie-ins, which is where I live, and he's a dominant player. But I was a Houston Rockets fan, Hakeem Olajuwon guy, and I love seeing Hakeem dominate Shaq in the playoffs. Anyway, watching those games were certainly more fun than playing Shaq Fu. Next up at number 2, Superman, the New Superman Adventures, more commonly referred to as Superman 64 for the Nintendo 64. This is another game like Shaq Fu that's famous for being bad. I remember when it came out, playing this game in GameStop kiosks. This game was hugely promoted. It was everywhere. It was at 3 different E3s where it was showcased. It was at GameStop kiosks all over the place. I remember going into a GameStop and seeing this and like, oh cool, a new Superman game. Awful. It's one of the most mocked games of all time. You're forced as Superman to fly through endless rings in a fog-covered version of Metropolis. Just lazy graphics. The controls are unresponsive, flight feels really heavy, and objectives are vague and repetitive. Combat sections are just as bad, filled with glitches and poor collision detection. There's that term again, poor collision detection. Terrible graphics. For a game that's about Superman, it sure makes you feel powerless. There are so few good Superman games, which is really unfortunate. One of the really only good ones, there's a pretty solid one for the Sega Genesis called Superman. There's a solid game in the arcades called Superman. The 2600 version of Superman was groundbreaking back in the day. Probably wouldn't want to play it today. But Death and Return of Superman is one of the few Superman games I go back to periodically. Superman for the NES is awful. So yeah, there's just a ton of bad Superman games. It's unfortunate because you'd think it would be perfect for a game. You just have this awesome character with all these incredible abilities. It would make a fantastic game in the right hands, and to this day, there are hardly any, and Superman 64, as it's commonly known, is simply dreadful. It's a punchline. Next up, at number 1, you probably knew what I was going to say here, E.T. the Extra Terrestrial for the Atari 2600. No, E.T. is not the worst game of all time. It became a meme, and with the rise of YouTube and everything and social media, and people that barely knew anything about video games, or casual gamers, or modern gamers who just barely know a little bit about older games, would call E.T. the Extra Terrestrial the worst game of all time. It's not even close, but it is famous for being bad. It is famous for being a failure, which puts it on that list. The title screen and opening music are the best part of the game. It looks like E.T., it sounds like E.T., but then you get to the gameplay. Now, like I said, E.T. is not as bad as people say, but it's not a great game either. It was rushed to market in just 5 weeks, programmed by Howard Scott Warshaw, who pulled off a miracle programming this game so quickly. It was rushed into market to hit the 1982 holiday season. E.T. became the poster child for bad game design. The goal is to collect phone parts to help E.T. phone home, but most kids didn't read the manual and didn't really know how to play it, so they were unclear how to play. You constantly fall into pits, you struggle with the awkward controls, and wander through similar screens. Not the greatest game in the world, but again, not the worst. Games like Snake and Firefly for the Atari 2600 are worse. Yeah, E.T.'s not even the worst game on the 2600, but it was a big commercial failure. It played some role in leading to the video game crash of 1983, but there were definitely far more important market forces at work, but it didn't help. And there were a ton of unsold cartridges buried into the New Mexico landfill famously. And guys, like I had said before, I believe that if E.T. would have been just a simple maze game, kind of a Pac-Man clone where E.T. is going around gobbling Reese's Pieces and maybe dodging government operatives, that it would have been a better, more intuitive, more well-received game. That's just my take on E.T. the Extra Terrestrial, a bad game based on a beloved film. Now, let's get to the honorable mentions. Now, this list could go on for quite some time, but I've just got a few here. How many of you guys have played Bubsy 3D for the PlayStation? Horrendous. Earthworm Jim. There's another 3D game based on a famous property. Earthworm Jim 3D, I believe it's called. That was horrible for the N64. I was so disappointed with that game. You guys, hardcore gamers, know that Plumbers Don't Wear Ties for the 3DO was a notoriously bad game, but I don't think it's as famous as the others on this list, so it doesn't quite make the cut. Wolverine and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I considered those for the NES, but X-Men just sticks out to me as just, I don't know if it's probably more famous among the general public, so I put it on this list. Action 52 for the NES and Genesis is notorious for putting 52 mostly bad games on one cartridge. There's a few playable games, but it's pretty dreadful and it's known for being bad. The Legend of Zelda, Wand of Gamelon for CDI. The Philips CDI is not a super famous console, and only, people that are really into retro gaming know about these. There's a couple of Zelda titles, and there's Hotel Mario for the CDI, the infamous, Nintendo making games or licensing games for the CDI, and they weren't great. Pretty well known among hardcore gamers as being bad, but not quite as famous as the other titles on this list. But starring iconic famous characters. So, if Mount Rushmore were comprised of 8 or 12 presidents, which let's hope it stays at 4, maybe we could expand the list. But anyway, that's why I have honorable mentions. And then last, and maybe even least, the games I mentioned before, Snake by Data Age and Firefly by Mythicon for the Atari 2600. These games aren't famous among the general public or among modern gamers. They don't have the kind of lore that Uncanny XMen, Shaq Fu, Superman, and E.T. have throughout gaming history. They're just known by Atari 2600 fans as being truly dreadful and much worse than E.T. the Extra Terrestrial. Now guys, I want to hear from you. Please let me know in the comments your top 4 most iconic bad video games. Now you can put the games you think are just the worst of all time. That's fine. You can comment with your bad games, but it'd be even more awesome if you put your Mount Rushmore of iconic bad games that are famous for being bad, games that are so bad that they've gotten known by the general public for being awful. Maybe they star famous characters, or they're just a laughingstock. There's memes made about them. So let me know in the comments. I appreciate it, guys. Now, guys, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got the 100 greatest games from 77 to 87 and from 88 to 98. 2 books in a series I'm working on. A third one is on the way. It'll be a couple of years, but these 2 are now available. I will put a link in the comments to my books and where you can check out sample pages. Thanks a lot, guys.